I want to thank everyone who is here joining us today. Thank you for going along this journey with our first Alumni Speaker Series. This has all been organized by the Purdue Technology Alumni Board, and we want to thank them for all of their hard work and dedication in getting this series off the ground. We also have some special guests joining us today from Steve Elliott's TLI 152 class today, so thank you for joining us and listening in. Again, hello and welcome to the first session of the Purdue Technology Alumni Speaker Series. The Alumni Speaker Series is a joint collaboration between Purdue Polytechnic Institute and the Purdue Technology Alumni Board. The purpose of the Purdue Technology Alumni Board is to support the efforts of Purdue Polytechnic Institute, formerly known as the College of Technology, facilitate communication between the school and its alumni, provide programs for professional growth, and enhance alumni relationships with the university and the Purdue Alumni Association. To learn more about the Purdue Technology Alumni Board, please use the Get Involved link on the Alumni and Friends page of the Purdue Polytechnic website. The Alumni Speaker Series is a monthly series created as an opportunity to engage technology alumni on topics that have broad interest to the alumni base. The presenters for each session will be technology alumni or Purdue Polytechnic faculty. If you are interested in presenting in a future session or have suggestions for topics of future sessions, please email techdev@purdue.edu with a brief synopsis of the proposed presentation. The only guideline for the proposal is that the topic is of broad interest and the presenter is an alumnus or faculty member of Purdue Polytechnic Institute. Just some quick housekeeping today. Please be mindful of the audio and keep your microphone on mute. We will be taking questions throughout the presentation, and there is a Q&A box on the side of your screen that you can use for that, and we will be monitoring. There will also be a link at the end of the presentation when you close WebEx that will take you to the landing page for the Alumni Speaker Series, so you can see what the upcoming topics and speakers are. The plan is to keep this on the third Tuesday of every month at noon Eastern Standard Time, so we hope that you'll be able to join us again. Today's session on entrepreneurship is being presented by Christopher Day. Christopher is a 1992 graduate of Purdue and since that time has started and sold numerous companies. Welcome, Christopher, and please take it away.
Thank you, Derek, and welcome everyone. It's an honor to speak with everyone today, and a particular shout out to Steve Elliott's class 152. Roughly 30 years ago today, I was sitting in a classroom somewhere at Purdue University. So I was asked to speak about entrepreneurship today and the entrepreneurial journey, and so excited to share some high-level thoughts. So I wanted to break this down into kind of three main categories. I want to start off by telling the tale of two entrepreneurs that I know, then talk a little bit about my journey, and then wrap it up with what I've learned along the way. Please feel free to ask questions. I'll try to keep track of the pane over here to the right-hand side, and I'll try to answer those as they come in as we go. Otherwise, at the end, I think we're going to try to have a little bit of time for Q&A. So with that, I will dive right in. I'm coming to you today from downtown Indianapolis. Our office is right on the circle. That's Lady Liberty out the back window if you can see it. So with that, we'll dive in. So one entrepreneur I know I want to tell a story about is, growing up, this person wanted to do something interesting in the world. Tried to be involved in various things in school, but lost leadership elections. Actually lost leadership elections twice, I think he told me. He's had term sheets that have been withdrawn during diligence process. He's had companies that had employees that stole from the company, customers that didn't pay. One of his companies actually failed, almost went bankrupt. He's had partners that have flaked out, never showed up for work. So that's kind of one story of an entrepreneur. Another story of another entrepreneur, was, I guess I would call him a leader of leaders at some level. He was the president of the Entrepreneurs Organization. He's done over $600 million in deals. He's won national and global awards for innovation with almost every company he started and been a part of starting. Sold two companies to Fortune 250 companies. met with global leaders such as President Clinton on the 1996 Telecom Deregulation Act. I think he met with Chairman Kennard, F.W. de Klerk, the President of South Africa. He was chosen for the Birthing of Giants program, the Entrepreneurial Masters program at MIT. So a number of things. So I think I'd always like to ask people, out of these two different entrepreneurs, who would you rather be? Well, some of you probably figured out it's the same person. That's my story. So I've been lucky enough to be a part of 9 different teams over the years. When I graduated from Purdue University, I thought I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I grew up one day, which we'll tell that story in a moment. But the short story is, became a serial entrepreneur, not by design, kind of by accident. And that started in college, and I will have to say in full disclosure, I don't have the logo of the painting company I had back in 1989. But I started a painting company, get through school, and then I started a series of tech companies, also in some other industries, including bottled water, commercial development, investment banking, tech apps such as petbookings.com. It still exists out there today. Some of you may be familiar with Sky Zone trampoline parks, and the company I currently have today called DemandJump. So I like to say that the story of every entrepreneur is the same. It's one story, and it's a story of peaks and valleys. It's somewhat manic. Some days you wake up and you think you're going to crush the world, conquer the world. Other days you wake up in the fetal position and you think, what have I done? And so that's the story we're going to talk about today. And so feel free to ask any questions that may come up during the presentation. So to kick it off, I was born in 1970. I grew up near Purdue University in a little town called Buck Creek. It's probably about 15 miles outside of West Lafayette. I grew up what you call German Baptist. We were basically Amish people with wheels. And I used to plow the fields with a 3-bottom plow and an old farm-all tractor, thinking, gosh, there's got to be something better out there in this world that I could do besides drag this 3-bottom plow around fields. But one thing that my dad taught us was how to think, and he taught us about work ethic and how to think 3 steps ahead. And so all I knew was to work really hard, and maybe I could get off of that farm and go see what the world had to offer. We were all expected to go to college, but no idea of how we would pay for it. So when I grew up in the high school and headed off to college, I started a painting company. So as Derek said, I graduated in 1992. But right after my freshman year, I started a painting company, and these are a few pictures of what I looked like back then. I had 14 employees in college. I tried to run it year-round from Purdue, and I had started this company up in Chicago, in the suburbs of Chicago. My older brother and a roommate of his, they funded this company to get it started, about $10,000 in cash to buy a van and some ladders and things. And that's how I paid for college. And what I want to interlace through this story are relationships that I made along the way. So remember a guy named Brad that was one of the people that helped fund this $10,000. And back then, this is before the days of Salesforce. So I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but the upper right-hand corner, those are calendars with yellow Post-it notes. That's what we know today as the CRM system, which was somewhat archaic back then. So then I graduated from college, and for about 4 or 5 years out of school, I was pretty sure I wanted to be a general contractor, and I was in that business for 4 or 5 years, but quickly learned that what I really wanted to be was a commercial developer. The only problem at 27 years old is I had no cash, I had negative net worth, and no idea how I would go achieve that dream. And so the person, Brad, that I mentioned that funded that painting company in college, heard that I had moved back to Indianapolis. Right after school, I moved down to Atlanta for those 4 or 5 years, and then moved back to Indianapolis to try and figure out a company to start. And Brad called me up from the painting days and said, hey, I've got this idea. I've been trying it out, but it's not quite working, and I wanted to see if you want to take a run at it. And the company at the time was called Resource Management Group. It had very little revenue. And the original idea was to broker bulk cable deals for multifamily and manufactured housing owners. So long story short, I liked the idea, but thought we had to take control of our own broadband signal. And so we started a company in 1998 called Starcom Broadband. The original name was Starcom Satellite Technologies, but we changed it to Starcom Broadband. And we ended up building cable systems in 3 different states. And our kind of claim to fame was, we will build a system that enables us to turn on and turn off cable at your apartment units or manufactured housing units. And if someone doesn't pay the rent, we can flip a switch and turn their cable off, and rent checks come in basically within the hour. So that's the system we built. We were going great guns. Revenue was growing, but it was a highly capital-intensive business. And this was the company where I had a $7 million term sheet that during the diligence process was withdrawn from me by a group of VCs. The reason is this was back in what I like to call the dot-bomb era, or the dot-com era, when people used to think that eyeballs were worth a lot of money. And the markets were starting to turn. This is back in the 2000 time frame. The markets were starting to turn. And basically, if we weren't going to be able to raise more capital, we would face bankruptcy. We always made friends with our competitors. So our competitors like Comcast and Time Warner. And we were literally roughly 30 days from hitting a brick wall when the phone call came in and Comcast said, hey, it's time for you guys to go away. We're going to buy you. And 10 days later, we wired the money to our checking account, and we had sold the business and out of business. So that's the first sale I had, and that business was between 98 and 2001. It was an exciting ride. Investors made 5x cash on cash return. We won awards from World Satellite Networks as Pioneer of the Year for some of the things that we invented and deployed in that business. So my partner and I sold, and we had no idea what we were going to do next. And sorry about this logo here. I couldn't find a logo for Viastar Energy. But from the Starcom days, we had one of our customers that we had serviced in Broadband called us up after we had sold Starcom and said, hey, I have some problems in utilities. I want you to come help me out. I want you to start a company to solve these problems for me. Well, we had just come out of Broadband, which is a very sexy, industry, and we couldn't possibly be bothered with utilities. Well, we finally reluctantly agreed to meet with this previous customer, and what we quickly learned was holy cow, this new industry called sub-metering, or automated meter reading, was a much better business model than what we had in the Broadband days, and we agreed to start this company to start off by solving his problems. We named that company Viastar Energy, and what we did was we developed a product for automated meter reading in water meter pits. And water meter pits is a very nasty environment. It's very, very difficult to be able to get radio frequency signals out of those pits. But at the end of the day, we built a product that we deployed in 26 different states that allowed us to monitor water consumption in real time and eliminate massive amounts of theft and massive amounts of wasted water usage, leaks, and other types of things. The result of that business was in 2007, we sold the product, the hardware, to Motorola. And in 2008, we sold the billing software that we had developed in that company to National Water and Power. So then along that same journey, in that same time span, we also started a bottled water company. I'm not sure why I did this. I would advise anyone out there that's thinking about getting into bottled water to not pursue that. It's a very tough industry. This is my one failure. And the good thing is we shut it down fairly quickly and kept losses to a minimum. Also during that same time frame, as I mentioned previously, I always thought I wanted to be a general contractor. And I realized in the early days out of college that I wanted to be actually a commercial developer, which is why I started that first tech company. So I did get my fix between 2004 and 2008. I had a commercial development business called Caldera Development with another partner. And we did about 4 or 5 kind of small retail, small garden-style office building type developments between 2004 and 2008. So 2008, I had sold everything off. I had done 4 companies in 4 different verticals in 10 years, and I was completely exhausted. And so I told myself I'm going to take a 2-year break. And like any good entrepreneur, that lasted about 3 months. And one of my older brothers, who also was the one that helped fund that original painting company in college, he ran 3 of the 5 tech groups for Goldman Sachs up in New York, and a friend of his ran software for UBS up in New York. And he had heard, through my entrepreneurial journey, trying to raise money here in the middle quarter of the U.S. and the difficulties of doing that in large quantities, like our tech friends on the coast enjoy. We decided to start a boutique investment banking firm that served what we call the middle core of the U.S., or kind of middle diamond of the U.S. and you think of like kind of Austin to Denver, over to Cleveland, down to Atlanta and back was kind of the area that we focused on, because all the tech bankers sit in either San Francisco and New York, and they will kind of cherry pick large tech deals in the middle corridor, but they largely ignore all the 5, 10, 20, 50, $100 million companies that sit in the middle corridor. So we started an investment banking firm called Navidar Group. Navidar still exists today. I did that for about 5 years and had a complete blast, learned a lot, but I missed the tech industry, right? Recurring revenues, forward-looking multiples, those types of things. So in 2014, I cashed out of Navidar to kind of look for that next technology deal that I would pursue. Also during Navidar, we set up what we call a merchant bank, and we did deals like petbookings.com, which still exists today. But basically, you think about humans book hotel rooms online, and so our belief was, why can't a pet book their doggy or cat hotel room or kennel online? So that was another company that we did, which was super exciting and still continues today. So I cashed out of Navidar in 2014 to start thinking about the next tech company. And meanwhile, I had, from a cash diversification standpoint, talked with another old friend of mine that's an entrepreneur, and he had a business that was next door to a Sky Zone. So I decided to get into the Sky Zone business on the side from kind of an investment diversification process, and had a couple of different Sky Zones in Indiana, which we ultimately just sold right before Christmas, which was another great run. Made about 14x cash on cash return over a lifetime of that investment, and about another 3.5 cash on cash return at the exit. So that technology company I was referring to earlier that I wanted to start, I had always been frustrated with marketing over the years with the various companies I was a part of, being a part of helping grow. And I always felt that marketing was a black box. There was a lot of guessing that goes on, and so I met a gentleman named Sean Schwegman. Sean was the CMO of Overstock.com, and he went to Overstock as the CTO when they were in the $3-4 million range, and was asked to take over as CMO when they were doing about $60 million. And Sean discovered some things with data and using data in a different way that helped catapult Overstock from $60 million to over $800 million, and literally put some of their competitors out of business along the way. And so I met Sean back in the investment banking days, and we started talking about frustrations with marketing and kind of our different viewpoints on that. And over the course of 2 or 3 years, we talked about how we might go about solving those, and if we could still solve them in a better way. And so we chose to start that company. We launched it in February of 2015. We spent the first 8 months kind of figuring out if we could really do what we thought we could, and then started building the product in 2016. So what DemandJump does is, still today, in 2019, shockingly, there is a gross misalignment between how marketers are forced to execute today and how the real world of the market or consumers actually behave. And so where you have success in marketing today, that's what we would call effective digital marketing. But where we don't have success, that's what we would call massive amounts of wasted spend and missed opportunity in terms of revenue. And so we always like to say, don't take our word for it. Look to the industry metrics. And if you look at third-party industry metrics out there, 0.05% click-through rates in display, right? 91% of ads are viewed for less than a second. 26% of budgets are wasted on ineffective channels and strategies. There's no other department in any organization that would get a free pass with these kind of metrics. If you think about finance, if you think about sales, if you think about operations, if other departments performed this way inside of a company, people wouldn't be there very long. And it's not the marketer's fault, though. It's become an extremely complex world. But basically what they're faced with is, in the digital world, you can't see that waste very effectively. You can't see the lost revenue or the gaps and opportunities very effectively today with other silo-based tools that are 10, 20 years old. And so we like to show this picture sometimes, where this is literally what's happening with marketer spend online. Most of the tools out there today are focused on audience only, and we have found that to be very, very ineffective. What we have found to be much more effective is every company or every product or every service that someone's offering has what we call a unique digital footprint or a unique digital ecosystem that they compete within. And they have direct competitors and they have indirect competitors. And these ecosystems online become extremely complex. We're talking about billions and billions of data points at any point in time that are impacting someone's business. To be effective today, the marketer has to be able to unwind their actual competitive ecosystem. And if they're selling men's shoes and men's suits, the competitive ecosystem for men's shoes, dress shoes, and for men's suits, both of those are very different in how they should act and behave. And so that's why we built the traffic cloud at DemandJump. And there's really 3 steps that we boil it down to. Number 1, when people first connect their marketing tools and we first connect integrate other disparate data sources, we show them their actual performance inside of 2 hours. And people are usually shocked when they see these numbers. For example, and this is just one example in paid search, that what we call their quality score is 34%. Anything under 70% means this company is wasting massive amounts of money and losing out on massive amounts of revenue. Then the second step is we show them the gaps and opportunities. So let's think about blogs, for example. There are thousands and tens of thousands of blogs out there that pop on and off the world stage at any given moment. Any given day, what are the most powerful blogs ranked in order that I should focus on? A marketer can't see that today, so we show that to them. And then the third step is to show them the actual most powerful actions cross-channel that they can take next to start doubling their performance. And so these are what those results look like. Most people in display, if you can get 2 or 3 or 4% increase in performance, you're doing really, really well. Every case study we have is doubling and tripling the increase in click-through rates and conversions on typically half the spend. In paid search, we see these types of examples all the time where we're cutting out 15 to 20% of the paid search spend and increasing revenue by double and triple. Same thing with affiliates, same thing with marketplace. This example of marketplace is Amazon. So that's a little bit about what we do today at DemandJump. To wrap it all up, I would say from my perspective and all the other entrepreneurial friends I have, it's peaks and valleys. Some days we wake up, we think we're going to conquer the world. Other days we wake up and we say, what the hell am I doing, or what did I do by getting into this business? But I think if I step back and think about over the last 21 years of if I go all the way back to the painting days, I guess that's 30 years. So over the last 30 years, 25 of those I've spent partnering up with people who are smarter than me to try to solve an interesting problem and try to add value. And so as I step back and I think about it, entrepreneurship to me, I think, comes down to kind of 3 main things. Relationships, right? Always performing and delivering value for people. Perseverance, there's going to be days where you feel like you just got hit by a freight train, but all you can do is pick yourself back up and take a step forward. And then the last thing is add value. If you're continually adding value to people's lives, whether it be personally or professionally, I think people remember that, and they want to help you be successful in the future. So I went a little bit faster. It's 25 minutes into it, so we have plenty of time left here. But Derek, if we want to go into questions or open it up to anything in general, I'm more than happy to go through that.
Sure. First of all, thank you very much for sharing your story and your insights on entrepreneurship. I do have a little bit to tag on to at the end, but right now, why don't we open up for Q&A? So if anyone has a question, please use the Q&A box on the side of your screen, and we'll hold for just a moment while people type those in. First question, what would you say was the hardest undertaking or company to get off the ground? And this comes from Dustin.
So Dustin, the hardest company to get off the ground. That is a great question. I think I honestly have to say most of them were too hard to get off the ground. I'm just going to go through some specific examples. So the painting company that started in college. I had never painted anything in my life. I didn't even at that point understand the difference between oil-based paint and latex-based paint, meaning you have to thin oil paint with paint thinner, not water. And so we would literally rent a car and burn the brakes off of it over the course of a weekend, delivering flyers to mailboxes. We would pass about 4,000 flyers in the suburbs of Chicago. out of all those 4,000 flyers, I might get 1, 2, or 3 jobs. Every other job was word of mouth. And so I think that was extremely hard because I had never painted in my life, and I'm trying to hire painters, both professional and college students, and literally just jumping off a cliff, hoping that somebody would say, yeah, paint my house. Starcom, the cable company, the broadband company, I worked for a year from about 6 o'clock at night until 1 or 2 in the morning. Literally, I worked for a year outside of my normal job, trying to build the business plan for that, meeting with people who built cable systems and what the gaps they saw were. It was a highly, highly capital-intensive business. I had no experience in broadband or cable, and so that was extremely difficult. But literally spent a year working from 6 o'clock till 1 or 2 in the morning, meeting with people, building out the business plan, meeting with potential customers, and asking them, if I start this company, will you buy? And literally the very first deal that we got was a big developer, and his last question at the last breakfast after meeting over the course of 6 months was, I have one last question, and that's, how many of these systems have you built? And I had no choice, right, to look him in the eye and say none. And he immediately said, let's go build 3. So that was super tough. I would say iStar was easier because we had previous customers from the Starcom days that just had come solve these problems for us. I think my first response when that customer called was, I don't know anything about utilities, and his response was, well, you didn't know anything about broadband either, but you did a good job. And that's because we hired really smart people to do something better. I think the bottled water, that's a really super tough industry because you have a heavy product that's a commodity. And then DemandJump. DemandJump is a tough one. I'd say the 2 toughest ones as I think through this are probably Starcom and DemandJump. And DemandJump, the reason it's so difficult is, Indianapolis has a really frothy tech ecosystem. And so to get great talent, the cost has gone way up on attracting that talent. So it costs more to build, that platform. It's extremely data intensive. And so just to build the foundation for a platform like what we're doing, it took us 2 years to build it before it was even, enterprise ready to get to market. So hopefully that answers that question. But that's kind of a long-winded answer, but I wanted to think through that before I got to the punchline.
All right, we have another question from Dr. Elliott's class, and that question is, how did you come up with a revenue model for your last product? The question relating to business models.
Yep. So I'm assuming we'll probably go to DemandJump on that one. The question was how did I come up with the revenue model for the last one? Is that right, Derek?
Yes, that's correct.
So it's a great question. I think the quick short answer is pricing and packaging is never complete. You're always revisiting that, on a quarterly basis. How we originally came up with our pricing model at DemandJump was to step back and look at if I was going to try to solve marketing challenges and pain points in a very different way, and I wanted to try to go out and buy, 6 different technologies or different sources of data. From a data perspective, I'd probably have to buy 30 sources of data minimum. I have to go hire a data scientist. I need a machine learning engineer. I need a front-end engineer. I need a back-end engineer. I need a DevOps person. You look at all the things that would be required for me to go out and try to replicate that, and then look at, what might be an expected payback period, over a number of years, if I was going to go tackle that challenge. So that was one set of data points that we looked at. We also went and looked at what marketers are already buying on a daily basis today and how much money they're spending. We also looked at how much money we believe we could save, and we continue to measure this today. How much money can we save any given company, and how much can we increase their revenue by, or if they don't have direct revenue, how much can we increase their conversions by? And so we kind of triangulate all of these buckets of data points to figure out what we think the market will bear. And then we went to market with that pricing, and we had people quite honestly tell us, you're not charging enough. And so we started to just raise our price. And also keeping in context, what gross margins, right, VCs or investors in our industry would expect. So hopefully that answers that question, but that's how we initially set pricing, and that's how we revisit pricing still on a quarterly basis.
Our next question, I think, continues along with that line. Whenever you start a new company, how do you decide on what the company should focus on? And do you have a methodology each time, or is it typically different every time?
Yeah, I think it's different every time. So number one, I try never to, so back to that add value. So before ever starting a company, I've never really come up with anything, I don't think, in my past that's been like, necessarily revolutionary, right? It's can I better solve a pain point than what exists in the marketplace? And so, one example would be Starcom, right? The initial business plan there was to negotiate bulk cable deals on behalf of private property owners. That's not a good business model, because the Comcast of the world, or the Cox Cables, or the Time Warners, once they called onto that, they're like, well, gosh, we'll just bypass you and go directly to the private property owner and negotiate our own bulk cable deal. And so in that situation, we had to be able to not only control our own signal, but then if I'm going to control our own signal, meaning go out and build what's called a head end, right, where you have a bunch of equipment that enables you to bring in all of these different channels. But then what's my differentiator then if I go to the private property owner? And so if I walk into a private property owner and I say, I'm going to build a head end, and I'm going to promise not to drag cables across your sidewalks and drape them across your buildings. I'm going to give you better service. Okay, that's good, but for many owners, that's not good enough. And so then that evolved into finding a technology and help finalize development of a technology that enabled us to turn on and turn off people's cable in their apartments if they didn't pay their rent. Now I have something that's disruptive, right? Where literally from our office, we were controlling cable systems in 3 different states, and when an email or a phone call would come in from a landlord to say, hey, these units have not paid their rent, it was due today, these 6 units, flip them off. We would flip the switch off, and literally rent checks would arrive that night at 6 o'clock. So all of these companies have stories about what we first set off to do, and it changed several times throughout. ViaStar Energy, for example, when we first started that company, we were just using another technology. It was basically a service business. We were using another technology that was somebody else's, and we would resell that to multifamily owners, and we would install these systems and measure the water consumption. Well, we discovered there's this massive greenfield in municipalities and investor-owned utilities where nobody had still solved automated meter reading for water. So people had solved largely, automated meter reading for electric, for gas, and those are much easier to solve because of just the nature of those utilities. Well, we knew that technology had gotten to a point where it might be cost effective to try to take another crack at building a piece of hardware that could survive the constraints of being buried in mud and water meter pits. And we partnered with the world's greatest RF expert, and that's Motorola, especially at the time, to build a new product. We never planned on doing that when we first started ViaStar. So that changed very quickly. With DemandJump, we first started with only tackling solving affiliates, but we quickly learned that in paid search and display, that's the lion's share of any marketer's budget. And so really we should focus there first and solve those problems, because that impacts everything else downstream. So those would be a few examples of I think, with any business, when you get started, you think you know exactly what you're going to do, but the market will very quickly start directing you what they really want you to do, and you have to be open and willing and nimble to shift to solve those issues.
Great. Well, we have another question from Dr. Elliott's class, and in the meantime, we probably have time for about 1 or 2 questions, so if anyone has any of those burning questions they want to ask, now's your time. But this question, when you started Caldera Development, how did you get new customers to trust your capabilities because of how new the company was and your track record?
So calendar development's a little bit of a different one from a customer standpoint. Because with Caldera, we would go out, partner with somebody, and buy a piece of land. And my background was kind of in general contracting, commercial construction, and also in kind of the owner rep business. So Caldera wasn't difficult from a customer standpoint. It was more difficult from trying to get someone who owns a piece of land that's not developed to get them to sell it to you versus the next developer. So I would say how do you get customers to sign up with you? Some other examples might be like, so Starcom, for example, and I believe I mentioned previously, getting the first customer in Starcom, it was 6 months of meetings, telling them what I thought we could do, how I thought we could do it better, why he should want to buy from Starcom, but literally looking face to face at a breakfast, and him asking me, looking me square in the eye, how many of these have you built? And I looked him right back in the eye and said, none. And his response was, then let's go build 3. And it's because of that honesty, right? I think being vulnerable, being transparent, we're big on transparency here at DemandJump. If you're just open and honest, then people will tend to trust you and want to do business with you. I think also, throughout my life with relationships. So there's a landlord up there at Purdue University, a guy named Jim Cochran Builders and Apartments. And Jim had a bigger impact on my life than he ever knows. My first real job, besides detasseling corn, was working for Jim. And it was putting trash on South Grant Street, I think it was, Benchmark 2. Oh my gosh, that's a long time ago. I believe those were the apartments. Benchmark 2 at the very end of Grant Street. My first job when that was getting built was putting trash in a dumpster. But I was the best trasher, putter, and dumpster guy that ever lived on the face of the planet, at least in West Lafayette, Indiana, or at least it worked for Jim. And so I had built references along the way. Right when I was at Purdue, I was a Sigma Nu. I lived in the old house out on Littleton, and then I also lived in a new house. And we built a new house, and I volunteered to be the guinea pig, for the rover for our alumni when we built a new house. And I worked really hard at delivering great reporting to them while we were building that new house. Well, I met a guy named Al Worster. Al Worster, turns out, was my first job out of college, and also has become an investor in two of the companies, in both Biostar and in DemandJump today. He's an investor and a great friend and a mentor. So along the way, I tried to build a reputation of I will work hard and I will deliver and do what I say I will do. And so when I was going for those first customers, I could say, well, gosh, if you don't believe me, go call Al. Go call a guy named Doug Moore. Go call a guy named Jim Cochran. And I think you just kind of build up, credibility kind of step by step. And then once you get some customers and you're successful for them, then you can say, hey, would you mind taking a reference call for me? And it just builds off of itself. But it all starts with, doing what you say you're going to do. When you're in group projects, Class 152, if you're in group projects, make sure you're pulling your own weight, right? All of those things will add up over the course of your lifetime and be critical 10, 20, 30 years down the road. So that's how I've always gotten customers, is just doing what I say I will do. And when I screw up, which I do, I'm just transparent about it. Say, hey, I screwed up and I'm going to fix it.
These are some really great lessons. Thank you for sharing. Our final question from the audience. It seems the majority of your businesses have started have been shorter-term projects before switching to the next project. Is there a reason that you have continued to move around? And if you were to do it over, would you stay in any one of the companies or industries longer?
Yeah, that is a really good question. So, it hasn't been by design. And what I believe is that you should love your business, but as an entrepreneur, you've got to be careful to never be in love with your business. And so I think it just depends on what you want to do, and the nature of any business is different. But I'll give you a couple of examples. Starcom, we didn't necessarily want to exit that business, but there were market pressures that it was the right thing to do to sell that business. And those market pressures were back in, I think it was 2000, 2001 timeframe. Literally, the market just fell apart, right? all of the tech companies, the internet was coming onto the market, right? And people were getting these crazy valuations, and the entire market just collapsed, fell apart. All of the VCs pulled their money back and were only investing in companies that they had already made investments in. And so it was just the right thing to do. From a shareholder value standpoint, we had several investors in Starcom, and we could have tried to skinny weight down and tough it out, but we wouldn't have had enough cash to survive. And so when the call came in from Comcast, that was the right thing to do. Let's just pick another one. In Viastar, again, I think it was the right thing to do. Our partner Motorola wanted to move forward in a different direction with the hardware, and it made sense for them to buy that technology and take it and run with it. In Navidar, I love the investment banking world, but I really missed recurring revenue and forward-looking multiples. PetBookings.com, we were part of helping get that off the ground, and there's a great entrepreneur that's taking that and running with it today. And so that was more of a chairman capacity. So I think every business has a certain lifestyle. If I could do it all over again, would I stay with one and go longer? I don't think we get to make that choice as entrepreneurs unless we want what's called a lifestyle business. And there's nothing wrong with lifestyle businesses. I have friends that have lifestyle businesses that are, $100 million plus. I like to solve pain points, and when those things get solved, if there's a strategic partner that wants to fold that into their company and it makes sense to sell it to them, and investors get a great cash-on-cash return, and the customers will still be in good hands. If that's the right decision, then we make that decision and move on. Some of these companies still exist today, and I thought they were in better hands without me, right? So examples of that would be Navidar, PetBookings.com, are examples of that. SkyZone, I just owned several of the franchises. And so there was a parent company out of California, so that's a little bit of a different scenario. But we sold those to people that wanted to get into the family entertainment business, or folks that were already in it and wanted to expand. So I think every deal is different. I don't think there's any right answer. I don't have any regrets. I think in hindsight, the decisions that we made were probably the right decisions for the company for various reasons, and or for the customers, or for the employees, or whomever.
Well, Christopher, we'd like to give you a chance for any final thoughts, and maybe within those, you could talk about, in general, the technology scene in Indianapolis. And, we saw here in our office that DemandJump was nominated recently for the Tech Point Awards in Indy. So maybe if you could talk about just that overall technology scene in Indiana.
Yes, absolutely. Let's talk about that for a few moments. So we are extremely proud to have our office located right here in downtown Indianapolis, and we like to talk about a couple of high-level things that a lot of people throughout the country are not aware of. So, I like to think of Indianapolis or Indiana as the nation's nucleus, and it really comes down to 7 reasons why, and those are infrastructure, talent, mission-critical industries, tech industry, lifestyle, cost of living, and regulatory environment. And so, infrastructure, for example, we have, it's not all just about tech. This whole concept is about the collision of old line industries with data, right, and the resultant technology out of that and what we can do. So infrastructure, for example, people don't realize that we have the #1 ranked airport in North America for the last, I think, 4 or 5 years running. We have 3 premier inland ports that people don't really think about or talk about. Most of the cargo runs right through Indianapolis, right, crossroads of America, because if you cannot move people and goods, efficiently from one place to another, then nothing else matters. Talent. People don't realize that we graduate the second highest number of undergraduate engineers in the country from a regional standpoint, only behind the Research Triangle. We have an abundance of talent coming out of our universities, Purdue, IU, Rose-Hulman, Ball State, you name it. There's a lot of great talent here. Industry. We're the #2 exporter in life sciences. We're #1 in orthopedics. We're #1 in RV manufacturing. We're #1 in advanced manufacturing. In tech, excuse me, in tech, people don't realize that the world's greatest SaaS company of all time, Salesforce, has their 2nd largest physical presence in the world right here downtown Indianapolis on the Circle. Aperio, Wipro came in and bought Aperio. We have Genesis bought Interactive Intelligence. We have Home Advisor bought Angie's. We have incredible tech talent here in Indianapolis. There have been $7 billion in exits in the last 6 years. Lifestyle, right? You think about the greatest spectacle on earth, the Indy 500. We have the Pacers. We have the Colts, right? Super Bowl champions. We have the #1 children's museum, right? The Symphony. People don't think about those things a lot of times. Cost of living. We were ranked #1 for renters in the country and ranked #1 for first-time home buyers. We have the safest city in the country. We have the best place to raise a family in the country. And then finally, regulatory environment. We have the #1 ranked regulatory environment of any state in the country. That's because our legislators here truly try to work across the aisle and work with one another to develop great public-private policy. So those are, as you can probably tell with that, I'm super passionate about this idea of Indiana being a nation's nucleus, this idea of the productivity boom, which is the collision of industry with data, and it's predicted that will happen in the middle quarter of the country. And I strongly believe that no place is better positioned in Indiana to take advantage of this next boom that's going to happen, which is already underway. So those are a few thoughts I have about Indiana.
Thank you. Those are wonderful. And on behalf of all of the attendees and the Purdue Technology Alumni Board, Christopher, we'd like to say thank you for sharing your insights on entrepreneurship today.
Thank you.
And thank you to all of our attendees. We hope you will join us for the next session of the Alumni Speaker Series on March 19th. Christine Narrett will be hosting a session focused on change management. And the following month on April 16th, John McDonald will be hosting a session focused on the Internet of Things technology. To stay connected to the Alumni Speaker Series, please bookmark the Alumni Speaker Series page using the link from the Alumni and Friends page on the Purdue Polytechnic website, and you'll also receive a link following this webcast. Thank you all, and have a great Tuesday.